As everybody knows by now, the Federal Reserve, Mr. Jerome Powell, announced
today the Federal Open Market Committee decided to reduce the degree of policy restraint by lowering our policy interest rate by a 0.5 percentage point.
Finally! It's a miracle. Us in the real estate business are super thankful, grateful. It's been a while. And those around the world, especially in the US, finally got our first rate cut in a long time. And even though we thought it was going to be 25, there was another surprise where he came in at 50 basis points, which is huge. I appreciate Mr. Jerome Powell. I think he should have cut in July. This is why in September, he decided to whack at 50 basis points. And so today I want to dive and unpack, what does this mean about 50 basis point cut? What does that mean? What, like in English, what, like in just terms, like dumb it down, Kenny. What does that mean? What are some of the misunderstandings? What are the fears that people have, the doubts? Is this good? Is it bad? Does it mean we're going into a recession? So today, let's break it down. Let's dive into it because you guys want to know and want to know if rates are coming down, because I'm on the phone constantly. Everybody in the US that is a loan officer got hammered this last week. And the two questions that they probably got is, how much did the rates come down? And hey, should I refi? Should I wait? Are they going to come down lower? Even though that seemed like more than two questions, that was a common conversation. Where are rates now? Where are they going? Should I refi now? Should I wait? Does it really mean they just cut rates by 50 basis points? Let's dive into it. So what is the Federal Funds Reserve rate, if you didn't know? For those of you living under a bridge, under a rock, or on a desert island, or a tropical island by yourself, and if you do that, congrats to you. What is the federal funds rate? Why does it matter? Why does it matter when they cut? Why is it such a big deal? Well, first of all, folks, my name is Kenny Simpson. If we have never met, welcome. I focus on 1 to 4 unit financing. That means I help anybody that's a first-time home buyer. Maybe you're in the military, maybe you're using an FHA loan, conventional, all the way to the self-employed, very active real estate investor. I've been doing mortgages for 20 years. Yes, that's a long time, and it's aging me. I've helped over 5,000 clients, funded $1 billion of loans, and I create content like this for you, the consumer, to help you understand what's going on in the economy, understand about mortgages, housing, trends, data. We break it all down, dumb it down. That's why you're watching this video today. Maybe somebody sent it to you. Maybe you found me on YouTube, Instagram. However, I'm glad you're here. I appreciate it. If you want to contact me, have questions for me, comment below. Obviously, why not share this with somebody? Subscribe to the channel. But if you want to reach me, book an appointment below. If you want me to look over your mortgage, rates, questions, whatever it is, I just appreciate you guys watching, following. Anyways, back to why you're here, why the Feds cut rates. What is the Federal Reserve rate? Why does all this matter? Let's dive into it right now. Okay, so on September 18th, 2024, which was this last week, the Federal Reserve came out and announced 50 basis points cut. So for us in the industry, huge announcement. We thought we were going to get 25. And a lot of people thought the rates were going to drop by 50 basis points. And a lot of people were wrong. And it's wrong because they don't understand what it means. They don't really understand about how this all works. And today we're going to break it down. But what I kept telling people, if you watch my channel, that's why you should subscribe and get the notifications, because we do this week over week. And why not follow me over on Instagram too? Because you can get stuff daily of what's going on, especially if you're in the real estate business, you buy, sell, you refi, whatever it is, you definitely should be in tune because it matters. And locking at the right time, not locking, know what's going on, can really dictate from buying a home, not buying a home, when to refi, when to buy that investment property. Also, when you're making decisions, how you're advising your clients. Maybe you're just a real estate agent, you want to advise your clients on what's going on. I've got some great intel. We break it down. So it's last week they cut 50 basis points. But a lot of people don't know is the treasury market, the bond market, all that. We in our industry follow the 10-year treasury. Typically, that's where we watch move up and down. And that pretty much how rates is a metric of rates moving up or down for that day. So if I wake up in the morning and the 10-year treasury the day before, I'm just picking a number, was at 3.6. And the next day it's at 3.8. That means rates went up. If I wake up the next morning and it was 3.6 the day before and it's at 3.5, that means rates typically should have gone down. So in this case, when we know the Feds are going to cut rates, that means the data changed, their mindset changing, and they're worried about inflation, jobs market, all that stuff, whatever it is, the market sniffs it out. they start getting rates lower ahead of time. As we call it, it's baked in the cake. It's already in the cake. So by the time they present the beautiful cake and say, here's 50 basis point cake, yay, celebration, it's already in there. The rate's already down. So when people call you and go, hey, did they drop rates a half a point? Like, they actually did. They did that 2 weeks ago. They didn't drop the rates. The market just came down, and they came much more down than 50 basis points. So if you're sitting there wondering if you should refinance, you should definitely call your lender, call me, call somebody to look into that opportunity to see if it's worth it. But moving on about the Federal Reserve, why do they cut rates? Why do they have so much power? Well, that is their job. They control basically interest rates, whether they move up or down. As you guys remember, COVID hit, boom, lockdown 2020, and the Federal Reserve came out and cut rates, and they cut rates a lot. They brought them down to zero. They bought mortgage-backed securities, treasuries, dropped rates to historic low. And if you're watching this and you're sitting on a 2, 3, 4% interest rate, you probably got the benefit of it. And if you're a realtor, loan officer, anybody, a real estate investor in the business, and you're watching this, you got the benefit of it. And some of you got really rich, really wealthy. And some of you are just sitting on some nice low rates and happy as a clam and don't need to refi. You're just watching this video because you might want to be buying investment property, trading up to a bigger house, and want to know, Kenny, when are rates going to come down? Do you have the secret? Might have the secret, but we'll try to answer that question in the end of the video. The Federal Reserve raises rates or drops rates depending on data. What data do they look at, right? So basically, as you see in this chart, there's the Fed funds rate. It was at 5.25. They dropped it to half a basis point. So 5.25 minus a half equals what? If you said 4.75, you are correct. Their projection by the end of this year is to basically drop it another quarter. That is their projection. And the Feds are typically wrong. So their projection is going to be based off data. And what data do they really look at? Well, folks, they're going to be looking at unemployment. They're going to be looking at the consumer. They're going to be looking at inflation, all these different things. And if you didn't know what all those things mean by now, that means you've never listened to the Fed, you've never read an article, and you don't know what any of this is talking about. All they look at is data that is going on around in the U.S. economy and what affects how it speeds up or how it slows it down. So if unemployment is going up and inflation is coming way down and the consumer is getting soft and worried, that means the market, right? The overall market, the economy is starting to slow down. So the Feds, when they dropped rates, they stimulated the market, and all you went out and bought a bunch of houses and cars and stuff and stimulated, and money was flowing, and oh my gosh, and prices went up, and And then they said, shit, we need to stop this. And they jacked rates up real high, and that's where everything kind of slowed down. And now they need to ease that because the economy is slowing. And it's starting to slow at a pace that maybe they don't like. And what they really focus on is that unemployment number that went from like 3.3 to 4.2. And when that starts creeping up more and more, that is when they will start cutting more rates. So if you wanted to know when they're going to drop rates more, and as you can see through so some of the charts we're putting up, obviously covers labor. And you can clearly show that in 2023, if you just took November, December, that the unemployment rate was a lot lower than it is today. And right, that is worrisome for the Fed. That means a couple million of y'all's lost your job, and that's not what the Fed wants. And the Fed has specifically say, to kind of quote them, not exact words, because I can't remember exactly, is that they do not want the labor market to get worse and worse and worse. That is what they worried. Because if you lose your job, that means you don't have a job. That means you have no income in. That means you can't pay your bills, you can't consume. And 70% of our economy, people buying stuff. And every one of you that buy something that you might not know this, 80% of those purchases are used with credit. Yes. So the Feds know this, and they know if you lose your job, you're not a consumer. You can't pay your bills, and that hurts the economy. Moving on, inflation trends. As you can see, inflation has come way down, obviously, from 21, 22. It's fallen off a cliff. Inflation is definitely getting under control. Their 2% target is coming in range like a sniper rifle. And so we'll continue to see that drop more and more. But they say the last mile is the hardest. And that's what we're dealing with right now with all of that. So let's cover a couple of myths around the rate cut. I've got 3 myths that I want to go over that seem to be common knowledge topics that we need to discuss and go over. No, I'm not a rate cut genius. No, I'm not an economic advisor. I just have been doing loans 20 years and I shoot data every week and I listen to the best people and I consume it, read it, swallow it, obsessed with it, passionate about it. And let's try to break it down and knock some of these myths because it's not always true. And you hear the media say one thing and then you hear the really, really smart people that know this stuff say another. And then the media tends to be wrong and late. And they just are reading from teleprompter and they don't really know what they're talking about. Even though I'm an expert on, is that expert really an expert? Do they even know? So let's dive into myth number one. Lower rates mean economic relief. And true. Actually, when they start cutting rates, typically this means that they are starting to worry about the economy. That does not mean that it's going to stimulate. It's this. And you got to remember, we're still in restrictive policy until they get to about a 1.25 cut. That is neutral policy. So we're still in restrictive. That means they're still tightening us a little bit, keeping the economy slow. But if they're starting to see this thing slow off, the wheels fall off, unemployment rate go up, remember, like I said, they will cut faster, quicker. And that's why you never know predictions or if they're right. And also keep in mind, a lot of times when they start cutting rates, a recession is after because the economy starts to slow, unravel, and they're trying to stimulate into a slowing economy to bring us out of a recession. So stay tuned for that. For the good old R word, is that going to happen? Myth number 2, the Fed always cuts rates when the economy is in trouble. And that is not true. We've been living in an economy that's been slowing. Economy that might be in trouble. Sometimes they're too early. Sometimes they're too late. Sometimes they don't do anything. In this case, they probably should have cut in July. That's why they probably did the 50 basis points. So they're not always cutting when in trouble because not every part of the economy is in trouble. For example, commercial real estate is in trouble. The office part. They're not cutting because of the office, right? So you can't afford to buy a home. They're not cutting because of that. You see what I'm saying? The consumer is slowing down. Certain restaurants or retail are having trouble. They're not cutting because of that. They're simply cutting because they feel that they don't want this economy to stop too much and they don't want people to lose their jobs. So just because certain parts of the economy slowing does not warrant a rate cut. And myth number 3, the final one that I want to go over, a rate cut will lead to crazy inflation. Well, we can't confirm or deny this because we are living in crazy times. We've never lived through these times. In our generation, we've never had a pandemic where when we went into a pandemic, they basically took an atomic bomb of money and dropped it in the US and globally and basically printed 40% of the money supply in our life. They literally dropped $9 to $10 trillion on us, like, and blew up the economy. And so with that being said, we're living with that. We're dealing with that. That really what caused inflation is giving money to people. So they're going to be cautious. They're going to proceed with caution, make sure this doesn't happen. But typically, when you cut rates in 07, 08, that does not lead to inflation. Not necessarily, because inflation necessarily wasn't just caused by cutting rates. Inflation, a lot of times, is caused by actually taking money and handing it to the people directly, like we did with the pandemic. We literally gave business owners money. We literally gave people money. We literally gave states, cities, bailouts, the whole thing. Money was flying everywhere, folks, and inflation went up. And we locked people in. So we came out and we knew we were going to have some inflation, just not that much. So anyways, cutting rates does not necessarily lead to inflation. Sometimes cutting rates and starting to cut rates, you're cutting rates into a recession, which is completely different than inflation. And hopefully inflation doesn't go up because that is more problems and it could cause stagflation, which is a whole other topic and story that you can look up and check out. On top of this, there's also some misinformation out there that is talked about when rates get cut. So let's dive in to a couple of those because I got 2 for you. Number 1, rate cuts are always beneficial for consumers. That is not true, folks, because if they start cutting rates, that money that is in your money market account, your CDs, or in the 10-year treasury, or the T-bills you're in, that will start coming down. So your saving rate goes to, you said it, crap. Number 2, it does not always benefit consumers because that means if you're cutting rates, the economy could be slowing and heading into recession. So that means a warning sign, ding, 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 that we're going to recession and you might lose your job. And how is that benefiting you? I don't really know. But at the end of the day, when they cut rates, it's not quick, it's not right away, and it takes time to get there. So keep that in mind as we unravel this. Misinformation number 2, the Fed only solely cuts on inflation. We already know that is not true because if they would have cut on inflation, they would have cut a while ago. It's not about that. It could be inflation, it could be consumer, it could be jobs. But right now they're really focused on jobs and inflation's under control. So that is not true at all. So there's obviously doubts and fears when the Fed cuts rates because they're like, oh my gosh, the economy getting worse? Is it falling off a cliff? Is it going to get bad? It could, folks. That is the thing. That's why they cut. But they're trying to get ahead of it. We will not know until a year from now if they're early, they're late, there's a recession, all that. So don't stress. Don't fear the unknown. Just know that rate cuts are part of the cycle. We are in a cycle and we went into a high inflation cycle. We're coming out of it and we're starting to go to lower rates. Hopefully that will give some relief to home buyers with credit cards, with business loans, with lines of credit, and stimulate the economy and get some of these small businesses back or big businesses in the commercial market. And then, the Feds be able to refinance some of their debt. So lower interest rate is not always a fear, panic mode, but it could be resulting into a slower economy. So you need to plan for that. and make sure you're getting ahead of it. So staying in tune and watching the right information and shows like this can help you stay afloat and ahead of the game. So look, at the end of the day, the Federal Reserve decided to cut rates. They will continue to cut rates depending on what the economy does. If it slows, they'll cut. If it starts to stimulate back up inflation, they will not cut. They could raise rates, right? But you got to stay informed. You got to watch the right people. You got to be around the right teams, mentors, economists, journalists, YouTubers. Just kidding. But if I can help you out, hit me up below. Appreciate you guys watching. And remember, if you're going to buy a house, you're going to refinance, just work with the right people, the people guiding you, the people you trust, the people that are steering you, that are really about you. They're putting their commission over the relationships. We call it relationships over transaction, because that's what's important. So whether you're dealing with a financial advisor, you're dealing with somebody you're trying to get guidance for your home loan or buying a house, or you're just confused about all this, make sure you're watching the right people that follow data, that understand what's going on. And don't fear the Fed. Don't fight the Fed. The Fed is typically here to help. They're trying to stay at the front of the game. They're trying to have a soft landing, not a hard landing. A soft landing would be a nice, easy recovery, and a hard landing would be some economic pain and potentially a recession. We don't know what's ahead. You never know. So if anybody tells you they know, they don't. And I did tell you before you leave, I tell you the prediction of rates. Well, the prediction of rates for the Fed says a quarter more this year cut, and next year 100 basis points. And that is all dependent on the data, folks. That all is dependent on inflation, jobs, consumer, all that stuff. And my prediction is that if they cut a point a quarter, that would take a point and a quarter off a rate that you got quoted today. So if you got quoted 6%, that would mean your new rate could be what? 4.75? But my projection is that depending on where the data goes, rates could go from point and a quarter to 2%. So if the data comes in worse, you might have a period where you can lock in a much lower rate. So keep that in mind. But if I can help, let me know, reach out, hit me up. But if not, if you're looking to refinance, if you're not ready yet, you're looking to buy, stay tuned into the channel, stay tuned into our information. Appreciate you guys. Talk to you soon. Have a good week. We'll see you next week. And remember, watch that data.